Hello, 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 hello. Yes, we are on CodeZone episode 57. Right, sorry for the rush start. I was running a little bit late, just making sure I got things up and running. So if you can't hear me, there are probably some problems there. Anyway, yes, we had a good CodeZone for CodeZone 56, where we actually wrote some code. It was actually quite enjoyable. And so I'm going to do some more code tonight. But I thought I would just quickly, for those to play a bit of catch up, where are we at? Well, I finished off a bit of the tile painting stuff. You can still only paint sort of one thing now, but you don't have to click, click, click all the time. And I've added the idea of layers. That's really what the last episode was about. And I've added some tools to make the layers a little bit more interactive too. So I'm just going to sort of create an artificial level here with some bits in from what I can remember from my sort of Mario-esque styling. I think the warp zone areas kind of looked like this, didn't they? Let's have a look. Something like that, anyway. What I've got now is some properties I can set per layer. Let's have a... Oh, we've got some people in the chat. So, Gist99, hello. Bixie, hello. Pliskit, hello. Channel, hello. For example, I can now select a layer, and that's the layer I'm now painting into. I've not got the opportunity to sort of set the transparency on that yet, but what I can do is sort of set the visibility quite nicely too. We can disable the layers that we're not interested in. I also spent quite a bit of time synchronizing the layers with the rest of the environment. You'll notice there's a new widget up here. I'll explain what that's about in a minute. So let's just draw that back in. So one of the things I can do now is I can actually change things around. So if I go to construction, I can move a layer down, which brings it forward. So you can see how this cloud there changed its position. So if I move it up, it goes behind that one, and if I move it up again, it's gone behind the background layer. And what was really quite pleasant to see is that this started to sort of happen automatically. The boilerplate in the background is doing the legwork for me, so I can focus on sort of the more creative and interesting bits. Babella, yes, oh hi. Good evening. Fulbian, evening. Speedy, hello. Alta, hello. Oh, excellent. We've got a thing. I'm going to have to disable the YouTube ones. They're a bit annoying. Basic stuff, but I've tidied up a lot of like loose ends behind the scenes to make this happen. So things are a little bit more robust now. On the whole, it's all pretty good. And what we see up here is the start of a tooling system. It doesn't do anything yet, but I was just experimenting with the idea of adding sort of a icon-based toolbar, particularly to that editing window. Did I also show you this feature as well? So you can actually change the size of the maps. So if I go to this particular layer, I can change this. So if I go to X, I can increase, and that's just for this one layer. Now, if I select a different layer, we can see that the grid has changed because the grid is basically only focused on the currently selected layer, which is quite nice. Now, if you shrink a layer, you do lose data. That's irrecoverable. Do I have any resources for stuff like this? Panning and zooming video is a good place to start. If you're just doing simple tile stuff, sort of integer truncation, which is featured in, floating point truncation, which is featured in many videos. There's not really much to it. The GUI stuff, you actually want to do it with all of this sort of more usable interface. Yeah, you do need to learn a GUI library. So I have a few videos on WX1. Wow. That's really loud. Let me dial that down a bit. Londo Spark, hello, thank you very much. Second Twitch baby. I don't know. I don't understand. Sorry, joke is gone. Yeah, I don't know. That's a Twitch thing. You're more into Twitch these days than me. We've got a basic 9 months to make a baby. Oh yeah. No, sorry, it's just clicked. Yes, sorry. I understand. 9 months to make one. I don't know. Usually about 3 minutes. So we can put some stuff on the foreground here. Let's have a look. Let's pick up a bit of pipe. Now, of course, this will overwrite anything that is actually already in the foreground layer, but it doesn't overwrite the things in the background, which is kind of what you want, isn't it? So we can put that bit up there, and we need sort of this side of the pipe down there. There we go. You haven't streamed in 2023. Oh, right. Okay. Another key presser. Hello. I don't find anything regarding slopes, hit collection. Yeah, there's I've done hitboxes and collision detection plenty of times. I know that sloped stuff in tile-based environments. It's funnily enough on the Discord. There's quite a few people asking about that, so it has crossed my mind. Should we do something to handle slopes in a non-physics environment? How do you handle them in a coarse sort of 2D platformer way? Maybe that's a video idea to have. So I'm just going to finish off this pack of names and things, just so I've got it here. So this static tile source is Super Mario Brothers. That's all it is from the first one. And the asset pack can stay what it's called. Construction test SMB1 level. There we go. Right. So one of the cool things I had to sort of learn was I'm surprised in 20 years of using WX widgets, I've never needed to do this. But I wanted to make sure that you couldn't just add layers. You see, it's an extra menu thing. So if you select something that isn't a construction, you can't add to it, which is ideal. Oh, hang on a sec. Just need to make sure that this is working. Asset ID. That's yeah, it's quite impressive that that's actually worked. So changing the name of the asset still allowed everything to link through. I thought we might have had a crash then, but okay. Fingers crossed. Getting a bit sketchy. What was I talking about? I've completely forgotten. Construction menus. So it turns out, did you know, there is no way in WX widgets to blank out a menu like this. So we'll have to have a look at how this is happening. You'd think there'd just be sort of a menu item disable, and no there isn't, sadly. It takes a rather obscure way of thinking about menu structures in order to implement, so maybe that's something to have a look like. Yeah, slopes are pretty fun. It also depends on how many you want. If you need sort of arbitrary angled slopes, then just get on with doing the physics. If you can tolerate perhaps just 45 degrees, then there's actually quite a lot of things you can do to sort of hack your way around that. Right, so I'm going to save off this workspace anyway. That was the plan. Workspaces. I'll actually call this one Mario Test. Yeah. Oh no! Crash! What have we got? What's happened? On tile save. Let's have a look. So this is what I was alluding to before. I was surprised that it didn't actually crash. Tile P source. Yeah, because we changed the name of the asset. Because we changed the name of the asset, it could no longer be found because we referenced the assets via name. So that's interesting. Oh, well, I'm not going to be able to save that, but there we go. Oh, I know. Oh, live bugs. Anyway, let's have a look at... I threw a quick line into the OLC Discord server for the CodeZone chat about why this is particularly horrible for menus. Right, if you know nothing about WX widgets, constructing a menu is done one of two ways. You can do it manually, or you can go and... here we go. You can do it manually, or you can construct it in code. Now, I've chosen, bizarrely, I don't know why, to actually construct using WX Form Builder for my menus. And I thought what would happen is you get something like this. So as you're constructing the thing, you've got a top-level class called a menu bar. And then you've got different menus for all these. And so I have something called a menu construction, which was that construction tab. And I was hoping I could do this. Menu construction dot enable, which is it's a function, that's great. Then it goes, oh, item ID bool enable. So rather than just being able to disable the menu construction, what I can do via the menu construction is if I know the item ID of the child item within the menu, and I don't, I can choose to disable it. So I tried all sorts of things, like, is it the root item? Will this do it? No, this didn't do it. Nothing worked. And it turns out that you've got to use the parent of the object in order to disable it. This only applies to menus. So you think, okay, that's great. So, all right, first, it's the menu bar. I'll disable the item. How do I go about it? So enable, Yeah, that exists. That's brilliant. Oh, and he goes, oh, brilliant. You've got like a full thing. You've got enable item ID and enable again, which, okay. You've also got, you can disable the whole thing. So I can disable the entire menu, but I can't choose a particular thing. If I did this way, item ID, in fact, it just doesn't work. So item ID happens to be the index, the number of things across. So item ID 0 would be file, then 1 edit. So there's no dynamic way of looking at this. So I can search for the string and try and extract the thing that way. So it just became a complete mess. But it turns out this doesn't work either. So instead, what you need to do is this mysterious function, enable top. I've no idea what it means. I just tried it out of just randomly spamming code at the screen, really, to make it work. But there you go. If you wanted to disable a specific menu in WX Widget, so let's say this project menu up here, I would have to enable top 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, false. How bad is that? Ugh, oh dear me, dearie me. Newbie Muffin, no idea what's going on, but consider me intrigued. Do you still have to change the colour yourself too? Colour of WX widgets? Yeah, it doesn't really have any sensitivity to themes really. Morris, hello. Yes. Oh, you've just missed a bit of a moan. So there we go. Menus in WX widgets. I don't know why that's the design choice that they've made, but it actually wasted about 45 minutes of my time whilst I messed around trying to experiment with their functions. And of course, you would, like anything with WX widgets, you search for help, and basically all the help is from 2011 things. That's okay, that's fine, that's valid. You go onto the WX widgets forums. There's basically just one guy on the forum answering absolutely everything. He's answered tens of thousands of questions, and his answers are all a bit, well, they're all a bit of a lecture, if you know what I mean. So, like, why are you doing it that way? Why aren't you doing it right, you fool? So, anyway, color of the text. No, you don't need to change the color yourself. No, it does that automatically, so that's okay. Yeah. So menus were one of the things, but I thought it added a nice bit of like user sophistication to the problem, to our application. I suppose our application could be a problem. Oh, because I've changed the file, of course, now we're going to have to do a full compile. Oh, that's brilliant. A one-man Stack Overflow. Yeah, I think he's just the like most dedicated WX Widgets guy in the world by the looks. So just every single time I ever look for help on that forum, it's always this guy that does it. Right. So what I was alluding to is these menus being disabled. It's disabled. It's great. Until you select a construction, and then I can go construction, add data tally, excuse me. Oh, dear me. And if I have another construction, so resource, add a construction, it should be smart enough to know the difference. Add a static tile layer, see? And I can go and add lots of layers to that one. And it retains the focus, which I thought was needed for a usability perspective. So it works quite nicely. And if you've got a static tile layer selected, technically you're still within a construction, so you can still add things. So there's a little bit more to it in terms of the logic behind the scenes to make that work, but it's working quite nicely. And the whole thing is actually very fluid now. So things are remaining sort of consistent as I'm clicking around, which I quite like. And I think I mentioned last time, you can't sort of double open windows anymore. So you can only have an instance open once of one of the things. I think Qt has a sensible solution for setting the widget. Well, nothing else like this in WX Widgets behaves this way. It's just menus. If I want to disable a window, it's window.disable. It's fine. That's no issue. Back in 2011, there was no need to disable menu items. Well, maybe. Apparently so. That's the takeaway message. Calvero, hello. And thank you, Magetsu. I looked at the doc for enable top, and I'm none the wiser. Yeah, exactly. Right. What does that mean? I mean, imagine the strength of the WX community without this guy. Oh yeah, I mean, it takes some dedication. I'm pleased that he's out there, and he's useful. His answers are useful. Sometimes you get a lot of You know how it is on our Discord server. We get some people that are new and they ask questions, and you've just got to have some patience and take your time. Standard in, hello. I pinged you yesterday. Apologies if I woke you up in the middle of something. How's fatherhood treating you? It's treating me very well. I'm up to a particularly grubby phase of it at the moment, but we're being successful. Although my house is never going to smell the same again. Require using, yeah, I don't want to use Qt. I'm happy with how things are going, and we're slowly moving away from sort of the limitations of WX widgets now as well. There's no real sort of extra features I'm going to add. Although tonight, if we get round to doing some coding, we will start doing some newer things with WX widgets. What else was there to talk about that was interesting before we move on? Yes, okay. Actually, moving the layers up and down. Right, you think this is going to be really simple. So I was dead proud of myself. I thought, right, I've got an excellent system here. Basically, I've got a standard vector in my construction of the layers. All I need to do is move the things around in that standard vector. And the rest of the system, all of this beautiful boilerplate that I've been working on for weeks, will just take care of it. And it didn't. It failed spectacularly. I realised why it failed spectacularly, and that's because I've got a disconnect between the tree in the top corner and the vector of objects. The vector of objects did actually behave as you'd expect. Things were behind the scenes all working, but because the tree is disconnected, it was latent. It didn't have like the most up-to-date versions of things. Ugh. Yeah, so it was a question about compiler design and parser identification. It's well beyond sort of my understanding. And you're using layers, you need to clear it with a blank colour. Exactly, Morris. I'm glad we're on the same page on this one. Good. You supported a design decision that I made. You got a lot of points for some reason. Okay. Good. Yeah, I have no idea how sort of all of the Twitch DLC pay to win stuff. I have no idea. Why was there a disconnect? Well, okay, another sort of dance down WX widget lane. Let's have a look at the tree control that I implemented, workspace tree. So you may recall that the tree control that sits in the top left here wasn't on its own sophisticated enough to render the project information, not without completely restructuring itself. And I hinted at this in the last episode, and we didn't delve into it, and I'm not going to delve into it now because it's not very interesting. But it relies on, in order to connect to the data within the project, I have two mechanisms of doing so. The first mechanism is a set of IDs, which used to be enum classes. Now they're just straight up numbers. At some point, you just grow so weary of trying to use C++ features because of the wordiness now that I just thought, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to use numbers. But because it's kind of irrelevant now, because I also store a weak pointer to the work objects, and the work objects are all the things that you can interact with within the environment. And so I construct this workspace tree link, and you're going to love this because we're going basically into void star territory, but that's a requirement. It's not not something we can jump around. When we're constructing this tree, let's have a look here. So, for example, everything that I add to the tree, I want to add a workspace tree link to. And this is effectively, this is a function provided WX widgets here, this add root. Let me just stop the running program so we can get some interactivity. This is the tree root. You add the root itself, you want to add this link, and it's basically it's just a nice pointer they've conveniently linked into the object, which is there for no other purpose other than to link it to something the user provides. It's a void star. It's disguised as something else. If we actually have a look here, it says WX tree item data star. And so you will have noticed that my class here inherited from that. That was just to make the compiler moan a little bit less than it was doing. So you have this sort of linkage between all of the items in the tree and all of the items in your project. First time chat from Young Lane. Hello. Oh, thank you. That's very pleased. Cheers. LLL did a great Void Star video. Void Star is underrated. It isn't technically a voice, but it's not far off. They could have gone down the route like they did with the property grid. Remember all that nonsense where we had variants and any's and everything else trying to make stuff work. At this point, some guys just thought, you know what, screw it, we're just going to use raw pointers in their best way, and this is why they're useful. Anyway, so I've got various layers in my tree. I've got the root. I've got basically a box for all of the main things that we're going to be working on, and I will be adding to this list as we go along. But it turns out sort of adding things to the tree was quite complicated because you've got to sort of index where it is in the tree and associate the right object with it. And I'm not going to delve into that. But then I had to have two additional functions. In order to select an item in the tree, I need to know the identity of the item. It has an ID number. In fact, it has something called a tree item ID. So let's have a look at why I'm calling that. If I go to, here we go actually. Oh, that was lucky, wasn't it? Move layer. Oh no, let's see. So add static tile layer. So this is a function I created that when we click in the construction menu to add a static tile layer, it calls here. Now this function, its purpose is to firstly add the relevant stuff to the workspace. That's our more in control, more standard C++ stuff. It's our vector of layers with this shared pointer to this polymorphic base type, a tile container specialized to static tile. It is a bit of a mouthful, but it's working quite nicely. So I can throw into that construction that particular layer type. Now it says add static tile layer, and you start to see all of these leaves and things. It needs that link, this workspace link. And there we go. I can retrieve the workspace link by casting the void star of the tree ID. This is the ID passed to me by what is currently selected in the tree. You've got to work within the parameters of WX widgets. It's all a bit messy. So I grab my leaf and I look at the identities of the leaf, and that's a quick way for me to filter out where am I in the tree, so I know how to link it to my project. I can use those indexes directly in my vectors of components. But I thought it would be more useful to have a tree looking forward where I can actually work in terms of work object. So I just thought, well, let's select a particular item. If I've added this item to the tree, how can I go and select it without needing to go through this sort of conversion of identifiers and linking and all that sort of thing? So I just want this select item and pass it in the work object. And that's where I got up to with this tree function. Let's have a look at the tree function. And to actually select the item, I know what the work object is associated with it, but I don't know what the ID is. So that's what I need to go and find. So I created a function find tree item. Which is meant to be used recursively. So it iterates from the root of the tree through all of the elements in the tree until it finds where the work object matches what is stored in the workspace tree link for that particular entry in the tree. I know we're getting there. We're getting to the end. Had to do all this recursively, and that took actually a bit of debugging. Why did that take a bit of debugging? Because I messed up. I did something where the usage of smart pointers actually caught me out. Yes, I messed up, and this took a long time. I just didn't see it, and I was stepping through the code, and I was thinking, what's going on? I was banging my head against the wall. I messed up because I had these sort of assignments in these ifs, which is the sort of the designish pattern way to handle when you're locking a weak pointer to convert it to a shared pointer. So I if that was to fail, what do I do? So I thought, okay, well that can fail occasionally, so I stuck an else here. That can fail occasionally, and it's had an else, and I had all of this in curly brackets. Like this. And I thought, okay, well that can fail. It completely changes the nature of this function. Anyway, I'll let the super nerdy sort of screen grab that and delve into why that becomes a particular problem. But nonetheless, lesson learnt. Don't always assume this is going to go. It's kind of a nasty side effect of using weak pointers, that you have to deal with the situation. If it can't be locked, what do you do? And actually, that's required in this case to just carry on working. So yeah, don't assume that not being able to lock is always a negative, particularly when you've got these sort of nasty recursive functions. Anyway, okay, we got there. So we can now sort of handle work objects directly in the tree, which is far more elegant than jumping through all of these indices. Right. Good. Type erasure is useful. Yes, it is. Yes, you see. If you think void star is bad, why do I put arithmetic on pointers in? Well, that's okay. Pointer arithmetic's fine. Yeah, it was a nice book. It really caught me out, that one. And it's because you read the code, and well, I've lost it already. You read the code, and my mindset is, right, handle the case of the weak pointer not being valid. And it doesn't matter. That was the thing, because if it was valid, it's never going to get to this code anyway. And I think that's in my head. I'd equated them being the same. Right. Added the tree. So what I thought we would try and start to do tonight is add a new type to the project so far. And the type I want to add actually is a direct steal from Pixel Game Engine 3. And I'm going to look into the utils for Pixel Game Engine 3 here. And it's this colors utility. Now, this isn't in PGE2. It's in a way, some of this is stolen from Saladin's plugin for the additional colors. I'll flesh that out later. But what this allows me to do is create something called a gradient. And I think color gradients are quite useful in the environments. You've seen these before. These are the classic things you see in Photoshop, where you can drag little arrows along and you can specify the color of the arrow and you can specify the position within a spectrum. And you can define that way a gradient of things. This is meant to be a 2D editor of things. It doesn't necessarily all have to be tile editing. It's going to be very heavily biased around vector editing. That's the future for this. And so being able to specify not just static colors but gradients, I think, is quite a useful feature. And so a few jams ago, when we did a jam about the weather, I created a little gradient class here, which allows you to sort of throw colors into it. It doesn't behave like an indexed palette. Let's have a look at how it's constructed. It's easier to look at its use before we look at its implementation, I think. So the idea is you specify a whole bunch of colors and the location within a normalized range. Now, technically, I don't even think it had to be normalized. Oh, it does have, yeah, I put in some feature for clamping. And you then sample. So let's say at one end we have black, and at the other end we have white. One will be 0, one will be 1. And so if you chose 0.5, you'd want some sort of grayscale in the middle. So it's like a color palette, but without the discretization of actually going into individual steps. Easy enough, but it gets quite tricky when you've got a whole bunch of different colors at arbitrary locations within that spectrum. And that's exactly what this function does, is it searches for the closest match within the parameters that it's got, and then it linearly interpolates between those two colors. So it finds whichever color is either side of the place you're sampling, and then samples it appropriately. And it was actually a little, I remember writing this, it was, I think, one of the first time I sort of delved into lambdas, so I was quite pleased that it was a way for me to learn how to do lambdas. So you can set the color. We've got to find, does the color already exist? We reject it if it does, or we just overwrite it. If it doesn't, then we can add it to the palette of colors. And so fundamentally, this gradient is really just a structure of a vector of pairs with an index location normalized and the pixel color itself. And it works quite nicely. That's it. It's very, very simple. I've provided some sort of like stock startup ones here, so you can start to see how to construct these things. Maybe a bit better if these are not all single line, but here I just specify the vector directly, so a grayscale palette. I specify it at one end, black, and at the other end, white. Simple as that. Cold and hot, so if you've done any neural network stuff, In anger, you'll be familiar with cyan at one end, black in the middle, and yellow at the other. We choose those colours because they're high contrast. And so you can start to see fine detail in things around 0. And of course, you've got the typical electromagnetic spectrum one here, where I take the major primary and secondary colours and just space them evenly through the spectrum. It wraps around back to itself on red. And so this is a nice way of setting up gradients. So I think having a gradient facility in our program as one of the fundamental types would be quite useful. And that way you can also perhaps set the tone for things in vector editing later on, where you can just alter the gradient and everything else in the level changes. So let's say you wanted your level to look a bit different in a sunset environment or at night. Rather than having to hard code everything again, you could just attribute a different gradient from which it's picking its colours. Quite nice. We have Bidoof colours. Yes, we do. Lord Luxud Königsig. Hi, Javid. It's good to see you streaming. How are you? I'm very good, thank you. Yes. Is there a reason you wouldn't use a map there? Yeah, basically, actually, Interest has kind of got it right. Probably a bit overkill. Well, also because maps don't necessarily work for the thing in between. Right, so they're great at finding precisely what you want, but then you've got to find values that are in between. It doesn't do that interpolation. Right, so that's the class. That's fundamentally it. We're going to try and start to integrate this into the rest of the software. Now, it could be a little bit boring. We're not going to have lots of flashy things on the screen, and I don't think, certainly in the space of half an hour, we're going to get the full GUI up and operational. But why not? We'll see where we get with it. So one of the things I need to open actually is my WX Form Builder editor. So WX Form Build. Now, interestingly, I have to select it here because that opens the latest version, whereas the default one at the top opens an older version, which I can't seem to uninstall. So very, very frustrating. Let's choose the latest one. Here we go. So this is the WX Form Builder pack. Why not use standard lower bound instead of... yeah, it's blanked it out in the Twitch chat. So, standard find. I'm guessing that you've typed in there. Yeah. Okay. Why not use standard lower bound instead of standard find? Is for the same reason. Yeah. It's no good just keep typing the same thing. I think for the same reason. If you've got in your vector 0.3 and 0.7 and you're looking for the value 0.6, it doesn't know to search for 0.3. Yeah, I think, yeah, Morris, I don't know why it's finding why it finds that particularly offensive. I don't know. Whilst we've got this open, I'll show you the menu. Here it is. Here's the menu. See, this is the fundamental lump. Well, it does. Does it? Oh, okay, that's probably worth looking into then, if it does. I have no idea why it's bite. Yeah, probably some like millennial tech speak we're not familiar with, Morris. So this is the GUI layout, and you can see my menu up here, and there is my menu construction. But this is what I was talking about. There's no properties you can set. I can't disable it. We went through all that. I'm not going to revisit it. Horrible memories for everybody involved. Lower bound does not assume the element is part of the range. I'll have to look into it. I don't know what the function does. I mean, we can have a look now, but I'm not sure what it does. Standard lower bound. Oh, look, it's essentially binary search. All right, okay. Lower bound. Returns an iterator pointing to the first element in the range such that element is less than value for okay. The range first last must be partitioned with respect to elements less than value. Okay, yeah. No, fair enough. Lower bound. Okay, so yeah, I see what you say. It's effectively doing a binary search to get there. Yeah, I think. Well, we can always try it. I think if you've got only sort of 7 or 8 different things in your gradient, it's probably not the end of the world to just do find. But yeah, if you're calling gradient a lot, potentially. When I was actually using the gradients in my application, they did actually have an additional function which did convert them to a palette of 256 entries. Okay. Hey, well, good stuff. Standard in. Thanks for pointing it out. Yeah. Good old Minecraft. No, I mean, I think that does actually make sense. It's that's the trouble with the standard library, right? You've got to know everything. Lower bound. Okay, yeah, I'll look into that one. It looks good. I wonder if there's a situation where it's not better. Yeah, I'm thinking there might be. No, it's log n. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's definitely worth checking out then. Yeah, good. So I'm going to add in a new editor. So the other editors that we've got so far are our asset manager. Let's have a look at that. So this is the one we saw at the start where we were adding some graphics and we added some buttons. This is exactly the kind of thing I'm going to add in for editing a gradient. So we need to have a thing. I'm making all this up as we go along. We said we would do some live coding, or at least some live drag and drop today. So I'm going to create a new panel, a container. And here is the panel. There we go. Ugh. Can't add a panel to a panel, so I have to select the project and then add a new panel. I'll get it right eventually. It's not that one. It's forms. But you wouldn't believe this, would you? This is actually a different panel, even though the icon's the same, than the one I actually need to add. There we are. And we'll call this gradient editor. Base. I always, because remember, in Form Builder, you sort of create a base class and then you go and override all of the bits. Since you eliminate most elements possible, the Matrix has a hard time predicting correctly, so linear search is almost always better for small contiguous ranges. Well, I think, again, it's one that you've got to try it, but it's interesting to. I'm definitely going to play with the function because I actually think I've got other uses for it if it exists. Where I think I've just implemented basic binary searches. Time to do benchmarking. Well, I'm not doing benchmarking live. Ugh, no. What we need is more thoroughly, grindingly boring WX widget linkage talking. That's what we just need hours and hours of that. Right, what do we need for our gradient editor? Well, first thing I need is a layout. So that's going to add controls to this. Benchmarking in C++, how I did do one video about benchmarking, I think. My number of character offset. Have you any unit, Morris? Get out. I'm going to get rid of this little moderator sword. You any unit tests? Does this look like WebDiv? Right. What do we need? Well, I was just going to have. How do we want to edit this? The simplest way is just to have a list of things that you add and then move things around in the list. But I've got a feeling most people would rather have something resembling the Photoshop way or other tool, where you have these little things that you drag around. There is no tool in WX Widgets which is comparable for that. So it would be creating something within a graphical environment. Now, that's fine. That's not uncommon to do. But I'd still like to have a visual representation of how that gradient is constructed and perhaps have the precision of being able to manipulate that. So for the first pass at this, we're going to have a list of the index locations and the colours associated with them, and we'll have some basic buttons to manipulate that list. It's going to look pretty similar to the other editor we created before for assets. There is a PHP button up here. It's good, this, right? Look at this, right? If you didn't know, WX Widgets does actually work in PHP. I have no idea what this means, by the way. I don't know how it works, but this is yeah, it can do all of this in PHP. What it produces, I've no idea. I've literally no idea. Is there a GUI environment for PHP? What do you do with the generated files? Okay, so for WX Form Builder, right, it is actually worth learning if you're going to jump into WX widgets. Let's have a look at sort of like a more basic one. So here is the designer view. This is the tool I'm using for generating the assets. Let me get that running. Because it's probably going to need to compile. Yeah, it will do when I choose the right project. Right, go and compile, and we'll come back to you in a minute. So it's a drag and drop environment to create WX widgets in things. Now, the one thing WX widgets is there's no sort of direct positioning. It's really frowned upon in GUI design to put a button on a form at a specific location. So everything is specified relative to everything else via the use of these sizes. So this is where we've got to start. Right? I know they're covering a lot of basic ground for a lot of you. So I have this base panel, and I've got a main sizer, and then I've got various tools and widgets which allow me to sort of position things where I need them to be. And some of the controls are quite complicated. So list control, even though it looks like this here, in reality it's not going to when we run the code. Excuse me. And you get down to sort of the very minutiae here. It's got controls such as actually selecting files for me, and we can put a button on the screen. Now, when you press the F8 key and you've got your project set up correctly, it generates some files for you. And we can have a look at this file that's generated. It generates just one file, and it's huge. This is the auto-generated code. If I go back into Form Builder, you can always look at this auto-generated code at any time by selecting the language you want to look at it in. And you can see the header file and class. Now, at the moment, it's just showing the code for the asset panel view, which is quite nice. It's rather contained, but you can actually look at the whole code by selecting something higher up the hierarchy to the whole project there. So this is basically the code that's in Visual Studio, and it looks horrific. The variable names are all a mess, but it doesn't matter. Right? The idea is you work with it in this scope, and you create this base class. Now, when you've added things to it, such as, say, a button, if you've given it a name, in this case, it's behind my beautiful face up here. If I just drag that over, let's just try. Oh, we worked out it's got a button. We've got a button dedicated for this. Watch this. Check this out. I can move that over there. When you've got when you name something, it changes the default access type in C++. So you can come down here to protected, which means it becomes visible to your code. By default, everything is private. And let's say I want to respond to the event of fit screen. Well, I can create a function called onViewAssetFitScreen. So that's the name of my function. It doesn't exist anywhere, but that's what I want it to call in my C++ code. So how does that linkage actually happen? Well, I say press F8, it creates those big files. Let's go and have a look. These are the big files. The Visual Studio is quite happy to sit and parse them. They look like a complete mess. They look like they're auto-generated, so you just never look at them. And the CPP file is quite huge. Yeah, it's just junk. Never look at it. Never go there. What we're more interested in is we created a base class. So let's look at the class that we derive from it. In this case, it is editor assets. Image asset pack. Here we go. So I have created a base class called editor image asset pack, and I immediately derive from asset manager base, which was the class in my WX form builder. Asset manager base. Now you can also go to tools and do generate inherited class. I don't do that. I like to just do it myself. The reason being is it puts a load of blurb around. You just got to then edit the file. I just don't find it very useful. So I wouldn't bother. It also doesn't do it in a way you can just go and then copy and paste, which is frustrating. So I go and create my own, give it the constructors and all the things that I need. But one of the things I'm going to override is, there we are, on view asset fit screen, which was our button. On view asset fit screen. So when I click that button, it's going to call that function. And it's as simple as that. I don't care how WX widgets goes about calling this function. It just does, and we can go and see. We can go do some code. Now the event handling stuff is quite sophisticated in WX widgets. In fact, it's one of the more pleasing sides of using it. It works very well. So you get quite a lot of information packaged into an event that's coming through that you can use for other things. But let's go and have a look at the constructor, because this is the other bit that people get wrong, and this is why maybe people do use that generate inherited class. You got to remember, if you're inheriting from the stuff from WX Form Builder, it's fundamentally a GUI component. So it needs to be constructed as a GUI component by something else. So it's important that the constructor understand that it's going to have a WX window parent, and that you've got to pass that parent on to the base class. The base class actually has all sorts of additional things in its constructor, basic WX widget stuff, but you can leave it as is. So if you ever do create an override, the only thing you need is this WX window parent. Another thing, whilst I'm thinking about WX Form Builder, you'll see everywhere you look, you've got this thing called ID. That's a throwback to old WX widgets. I just don't use them. Don't use them for anything. So events are all handled by talking directly to controls and connecting controls to functions. It used to be the case that you'd create a large, elaborate set of macros to handle these IDs, but that's no longer the case. That's gone. And in fact, you can specify in your project settings for Form Builder how it should handle the generate events. The default method now is connect rather than table. So that old ID way of doing things has gone. The infamous streamer button, exactly. It was had so much fun. You simply inherit the stuff. Yeah. IDs are old. Yeah. You don't need to use the ID. So to get a very simple GUI up and running, it's actually pretty quick to do things. As I'm hoping we can get some code in and have a look. I've lost the panel that we've just created, gradient editor panel. Right. Yeah, I'm not used to the properties being here. So to this, I've added my sizer, and I know that I'm going to need. I'm going to add a sizer with a label, perhaps, which can be. Do you know what? No, I'm not. I'm going to take that off. I'm going to add straight up a list. So the thing I'm going to add to this is common. The list doesn't need to be too sophisticated, but I do want it to have a couple of columns. If you want multiple column lists, then you need something. It's got a basic list box, which is just string items, but you need something more sophisticated. So we'll use WX list control. Okay, it just sort of throws it up in the corner. We'll do all the positioning in a moment. To this, I'm going to want an add button, a delete button, a move up button, and a move down button. And a choose color button, because that's also an option. I think we'll have a look. Yes, so we actually do have a color picker control. So let's add some buttons, but before I just throw these buttons randomly into here, I'm going to add another sizer to put these buttons in. I'm going to have one sizer which is vertical, and then I'm going to see what the buttons start to look like as I add them. So we're going to have add color, and move color down, and delete color, and I want to add this color picker control. Actually, I'm going to add the color picker control to a new. I don't know what the color picker control looks like, so let's have a look. Color picker control is just a colored button. So I think they look a little bit unwieldy being in that orientation. Let's smash those around a little bit horizontal. There we go. And now I don't want necessarily this whole thing to occupy all space. I do want to visualize the gradient somewhere. Whether I'm going to do that horizontally, vertically, I don't know yet. But I want this to take up all of the space in that sizer. So I can click the expand button there, which says, right, you go to the maximum space. You'll notice that these buttons don't necessarily sort of line up. They're not really behaving in a proportionate way. That's because the properties of this sizer are not quite the same. Yeah. He says optimistically. I want the buttons to have proportionality. So if we go and look at the properties of the buttons, we can go down to proportion. 0 means just stretch me about until I've kind of vaguely satisfied what you want. So if you specify that one to be 1, that means if I set them all to 1, they'll all be the same size on the screen. Let's add some text to them first. So this one is mbtn add color. And we'll give it the simple add. mbtn remove color. Remove. I'm changing this in the wrong place, aren't I? Why am I changing this? Label. Oh, right, yeah, okay. My mistake. Add. Enter. Okay. Yeah. I know. Remove. Enter. mbtn move color up. Move up. And finally, move down. And we could replace all of these with nice icons later on. How do you represent PGE3 view in the editor? Right, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's we can briefly have a look at that. We're getting into the realms of absolutely non-trivial now. So PG3, PG2, doesn't really matter, is fundamentally an OpenGL implementation. In Windows and Linux, and I guess most GUI environments, a window is just a number to the operating system. And when you connect to the graphics hardware, you specify which number do you want to associate with where this graphic is going to be displayed. Now, in the olden days, that used to be quite a rigid relationship. Now it isn't. So in order for the graphics to be drawn, they need to be associated with something in the operating system. And I have the 2 controls which are custom creations. I have this something called a graphics context. Now there's a WX widget tool already called a GL canvas. All that does is create a GL environment. It loads up the OpenGL functions. To all intents and purposes, it's just a panel. It doesn't do. Sorry, it's just a panel. It doesn't do anything. I've created my own panel, which inherits from this canvas, and my own panel has some utilities on there to start handling rendering automatically in the background, and some basic functions. So there's not very much to it. Where the fun and games start is in this context here. I have what is fundamentally, this is PGE3 here. This OLC GFX float. It's a bit cryptic. It doesn't even say the word PG anywhere, but this is the thing that actually handles how we interact with the GPU. So all I do is when I respond now to a paint event sent by the WX widget subsystem, either I've called refresh or something's gone dirty and it needs renewing, I sort of intercept. I'll have a look at the panel. I intercept the event on paint, which is a WX widgets thing. Let's go and have a look at the event on paint. Here we go, event on paint. I make sure that I'm using the right graphics context because I could have multiple windows. I don't want lots of. The reason you need a graphics context is, yeah, exactly this. I've got lots of windows, but I don't want them all having unique access to the GPU. I just want one instance so I can actually share information across them. And then I start calling some of my PGE functions, which, given that they're fundamentally OpenGL behind the scenes, just work within this GL canvas context. So it's actually quite a nice way. You don't have to use PGE, of course. You can use any OpenGL things that you're typically using. I have some code I've been playing around with as well. So it's WX widgets actually makes interacting with OpenGL very simple. That's you do use it if you can, because you can use all of the existing OpenGL things. You could even just WAS DRIM GUI into a WX widgets panel and have the two sort of competing with each other, which would be quite interesting. What is this wonderful GUI application? This is we're building an editor. You mean form builder? Okay, so how do you actually? So there's no inheriting base class anymore for OpenGL stuff. No, no, there isn't. You need somewhere to draw, and so you just create a panel which is inherited from that GL context. Once that's done, though, you can kind of draw anywhere. It's just WX speak for getting something loaded. Right, I've lost where we're up to. Up to here. There's no way to do that from within WX Form Builder, but what you can go and do, and it's actually an important link to sort of say what we've been talking about, because I do exactly this. In my, let's pick, we can pick the asset editor actually as an example. So in my asset manager, in the actual application when it runs, this blank portion of the screen here is actually the graphics. That's actually PGE3 doing its thing. It's a big OpenGL panel, and it's no coincidence that if we look at how this is constructed, I have the panel, I have the sizer, which contains this little bit up here, that section of buttons, but I have a blank sizer here called msizer asset view, and that has been made protected. So it's been named and made protected because in code, if I go and have a look at where's the asset pack thing. The first thing I go and do is create my own component. So this image viewer is my derivative of my graphics panel and OpenGL, and I add to that sizer my own component. So I've not linked that in through WX Form Builder, but I'm just, because I've got access to the constructor of the Asset Manager base, I can still further add more controls and do things that are more custom, which are beyond the capabilities of Form Builder. There is, however, another trick that Form Builder can do. If you can actually add custom control. Custom control allows you to specify the precise things that you need. It's a little bit hokey in a way. It doesn't get it quite right. You'll have to play around with it until it's right, but you can include the class and define it and get it initialized, providing it's all sort of ready to go. So I wouldn't use it unless you're really sure you've settled on it. That's one way of doing it. There's another way. If you're really hardcore, you can insert a custom code snippet. I've never had any success with those through WX Form Builder. And you can, and this is another really good way to do it. If we just delete that so I don't lose where I'm at. If we go and create something that already exists, so let's choose a button, for example. Let's say we wanted to run our OpenGL interface on the surface of a button. I can add the button, and it behaves just as a normal button. But what I can do here is it's just hidden away in this little bit of menu. I can subclass it, and it says here at the bottom, for easy use of custom widgets which are simple variations of the standard ones without requiring a new plugin for the form builder or WX widgets. So you can actually sort of override what the class is called. If it behaves like a button in everything else, you can actually change that to your own class name. And so you then get all the customizations that you need for that. So there's a few ways of handling sort of custom controls within Form Builder. Yeah, design a GUI for another game builder app. Well, I wonder if Form Builder was built in Form Builder. It sounds like a ridiculous question, and the answer is I'm not so sure, because it's certainly built in WX widgets. That's quite nice, but I think they've had to cheat, because I would love to get some of the controls and things that they've got in their editor. They just don't exist in WX widgets, so they've got some heavily customized controls just for this environment. I don't know if that's a bit of a cheat or not, or at least they should make those controls available. When we went down property grid lane where we found the mega macro, that was one of the source. I had to actually go and have a look at the source for Form Builder to see how they had made their property grid work behind the scenes. WX widgets ruined your marriage. Yeah, oh dear. It's a risk at ruining mine as well at the moment. Right, so where was I? I was adding some of these controls. So this is going to end up being quite a big window in my editor, and there's not much information. I don't really like sort of horizontal GUIs either. So I'm going to tell it that this list, I actually want to stretch out like that and occupy as much space as possible. I'm going to add, though, to this sizer, I'm going to add another sizer. I'm going to move all of that into a new box sizer because I want this one to be a horizontal one. There we go. Oh no, I want that one to be a vertical one. I want that one to be vertical, but I don't want it to occupy the whole space. I think is, yeah. That one I want to, because I need to actually add another control to it. That's the one I want horizontal, and to that I'm going to add a blank sizer, which is basically I'm doing the trick I've just described. I'm going to create some space for me to add things to it later. And by doing this, so by default its permission is none here. So I'm going to set that to protected, so it's available to the derived class. And I'm going to name it something sensible as well. So this one will be M sizer sort of gradient view. And to that, I can then start to work on a custom control which allows us to visualize and potentially manipulate the gradient. It'd be quite an interesting little project on its own, this, because as the gradient arrows are being moved around, we'll want the list to update, so we'll have events going backwards and forwards too. There are a fair few things to think about. So this is a GUI maker. Yeah, this is a GUI maker, and we're using it to make... Oh, it failed. Something failed. What failed? We had a compile fail. Ugh. Why not use Qt? Because it's Qt. If I needed hundreds of gigabytes of bloat and have to learn an entirely new ecosystem for something that looks like, well, not much newer than WX widgets. Oh, thanks, Robin. However, why is it, what compile failed? What, I'm curious to see what the error is. I'm curious now. Can we start again? It's not been the most interesting one tonight. We've been looking at some fairly medium dives into WX widgets. Not quite as bad as property grid lane and the mega macro, but having a look at some of the more overview of the architecture. Oh, well, those people have just turned up for a raid. We're just at the end. Oh no, that's such a shame. Oh dear. Oh no, it did. It compiled. That's okay. One of the other things I'm going to do is default this position. So for the stream, I want it to sort of be like that by default. Sorry, Coffee Lava. Hello, Foodie Pingu. I'm sure we can hang on for a couple of minutes and say hello for a bit. So those that have just joined, we're building an editor for, well, anything really. That's the plan. Let me see if I can find something I've been working with. So I wanted to sort of, I don't want to have to rebuild it, but let's have a look at some of the performance that we can get from this. I think, is this one set up? I don't know. Have a look. So this workspace has been set up already with some tiles. Oh yeah, okay. So let's pick our foreground tiles. Let's set this to something large. So 128 by 128. Let's drag in then our items, because I tried this. I did actually sort of show it on the Discord server. Just a bit of a test of performance. Because it's very unusual that in your own 2D editors you'll go to such large scales. People underestimate this and they think, oh, I'm going to have 1,000 by 1,000 tiles. That's 1,000,000 tiles you've got to place. Right? So, realistically, that's not going to happen. And I think being constrained to these sort of smaller dimensions makes you a bit more creative with your resources. But we can select a load of stuff here, and it was really, really quite pleasing. I'm running in debug mode, so you can see there is some stutter. But in release mode, it's like using a paintbrush. And we played with the idea of these all being sort of different shapes and sizes, and let's say that, and that's what we can paint. Interestingly, if I don't know if you'll see it on the stream, the selection update is more live than this particular window at the moment. But there was no sort of noticeable performance hit, even when it's got to draw so many different tiles from so many different image sources as well. Don't forget. So I was quite pleased with how it's panning out. Foodie Pingo, you're very welcome. Thank you. Arcor, hello, yes. Yeah, so it's coming together, and it's the point is that behind the scenes we're kind of almost over with the boilerplate, and that's going to be really interesting to start getting into the actual application. So the quick roadmap, where are we going with this? I'm happy with sort of the tile placement things. I need to add some tools to sort of draw rectangles and all that sort of thing. I'm not worried about that. The bit that I'm quite keen to get going with is the Lua exporting, and we're not far off beginning that, and sort of maybe we need to have some discussions in the chat about how we go about creating that architecture. Because the idea is any work object here, I want to be able to right click and it brings up a custom exporter, and I can then export that data that we have created visually in any way that I deem useful for my applications. And I've got quite a few things I'd like it to do. And so that is that for today. Thank you very much. Hello to all of those people. Thank you to those that have subscribed and followed. I'll see you all on the Discord server. And I guess I will see you this time next Tuesday. I have been doing some sneaky streaming on the Discord at weekend. So if you're about, I'll see you there. Everybody, take care.